Good morning and welcome to the Workforce Observer. We are pleased to welcome Mark Roberts on today's show. Mark is the CEO of TechServe Alliance, a collaboration of IT and engineering staffing and solution firms, clients, consultants, and suppliers dedicated to advancing excellence and ethics within the space. I'm really excited to be chatting with you, Mark. And I know we've talked a lot in the past, and I have been reading some of the stuff that you have put out. And I wanted to ask, what do you see as the most significant trends currently shaping the IT and engineering, staffing and solutions space? And I know you have referred to revenue being flat or down for the majority of firms in the space, but beyond that, what are we seeing?
Yeah, first, it's great to be with you, Subadhra. We've known each other a long time. I love chatting with someone so knowledgeable about the industry. Um, really kind of going back to that trend of being flat or down, it's really
Yeah,
what the broader environment is reflecting, which is,
right,
just really marked by uncertainty across a number of domains.
right,
And that is really influencing, I think, the overall industry. I mean, that is the major trend that is impacting the current environment. And we could talk about future trends in a
right,
moment, but
right,
I think we came into 2024. There was still the fear of recession, so that
right,
cast a pall of uncertainty, and then we also had the election pending, and I think that
right,
was also contributing to it. Then
right,
subsequent to that, alongside that, we've continued to have these geopolitical tensions. Now here we are in 2025, and some of the uncertainty, or obviously the election is over, so that's
right,
gone away, and I think the fear of recession has abated largely, although it's some have suggested it's come back. But now we
right,
have sort of policy uncertainty, I think largely driven with some of the upheaval that's going on in Washington. And I think
right,
that has cast a pall in terms of decision making among clients. And so,
right,
ultimately, if we're going to talk about IT and engineering staffing, we have to talk about the demand side. We can also
right,
talk about the supply side. And the demand side is really a lot of folks are frozen in place. Budgets have not been released or have been pulled back. And a
yeah,
lot of folks are still taking a wait and see in terms of their
right.
capex and things of that nature.
Right. So the clients are kind of frozen? Is that what you're saying? There's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
oh,
Obviously,
okay.
business is still going on, so we're not seeing this tumultuous
Right,
downturn. But what
right,
we are seeing is that folks are very cautious. What
right,
happens with uncertainty? Uncertainty is not welcome in many spheres, and that certainly
right,
includes businesses.
right,
Businesses do not like uncertainty because they don't know where to place their bets. What we would
right,
call investments.
right, right,
You could just imagine, with tariffs, where do I put my resources? What will be the impact of, particularly if they're operating in a global economy? Where
right,
do I, focus my operations? So there's so many questions. I think it
right,
will all settle down at some point, but right
right,
now, I think that has caused. Some consternation, certainly among business leaders, and that has led
right,
to a pause on certainly non essential spending.
right. And in this space, what would you refer to as non-essential spending? Because,
Yeah,
yeah, go
well,
ahead.
obviously, folks have to keep their systems running, and things that need to be upgraded, in terms of
Right,
their various systems that still has to continue, and investment hasn't
right,
gone to zero certainly, but
right,
I do think people are pausing for
right,
things that may be a little riskier or a little further out in terms of the payoff. They're just taking a wait and see. And of
right,
course, the other aspect of this is we have to put it all in perspective. We came off
right,
of, the post-COVID high in IT and engineering
right,
staffing, where the median
right,
firm, grew strong double digits 2 years in a row, and that's not sustainable. So we're also coming off a very high baseline and
right. That's true.
resetting some of the overhiring that went on,
Right.
during the pandemic and immediately post pandemic.
Yeah. Talking about hiring, how are staffing firms in the space, engineering, IT, dealing with the whole talent landscape? What is it? Because everywhere that I am looking at and talking to people, people don't want to leave their jobs because they're,
Yes.
again, the uncertainty, right? So,
Yes.
but then people still need to get things done. So what are staffing suppliers doing? Is firstly, is the talent being asked to do more with less? And how are suppliers dealing with this? Because, that's their business. They place people.
That's right. And so anytime movement of talent is restricted in any way
Right,
or certainly
right,
frozen, that's not good for
right,
the industry ultimately
right,
because,
right,
we're an industry that, at least a core of the industry is focused on the moving of talent, where it needs to be, when it needs to be, for whom it
right,
needs to be. And so if folks are kind of frozen in place and you have both, the movement of folks who are in so-called direct employer type jobs, working directly for an end client,
right,
are less likely to want to come into, consulting and staffing. And then, you also have those in staffing who are more likely to be interested in that perm placement job, that direct
right,
employer, so things
right,
that are at least perceived to provide a little more security in this kind of environment. So,
right,
so
right.
that's the challenge of the landscape. But then we still have the overlay of, talent in many of the high demand skill sets is not plentiful. I mean, that's the thing that gets lost here because we tend to
Good
focus a
point.
lot on the demand side. You still look at the unemployment rate in IT under 3%. And obviously, in certain skill sets, the high demand skill sets, those that are building out AI, large language models, cyber, things of that nature, those still are in short supply.
Yeah. So, talking about AI, what has been the impact on AI and other emerging technologies on the space? What are you
Yeah.
seeing? And let's first specifically talk about AI because I hear so much hype, you
Yes.
know, and then there is not the hype also. So what is actually going on? What are you seeing?
Yeah, yeah. I think we all want to know. But here's my take on
Yeah,
it. It
yeah,
is probably overhyped in the short term and maybe underhyped in the long term. Would be kind of my take. I think we're still very early days. If you think of, we're only a couple of years into the broad use of Chat GPT and it's sort of entry into the sort of the public space,
right,
among
right,
sort of the general public. So we are
right,
still very, very early days. But I
right,
think, AI is both, an opportunity and a potential challenge for the industry. The
right,
opportunity, of course, is to create greater efficiency in terms of our processes. Many, particularly on the recruiting side, there are a number of tasks that clearly
right,
could be automated and are being automated, but increasingly so, and it keeps
right,
getting better and better.
right,
Obviously, the realistic sort of chat bots, are getting better and better. Yeah,
right,
in terms of engaging with potential candidates.
right,
So we see that. So that's the opportunity, greater efficiency. The risk, obviously, is on a number of fronts. First, does it become easier for clients to self-service using technology? So that's a risk.
right,
Client direct sourcing, leveraging AI tools. But
right,
then the other is, just going to the use of AI, just in terms of many IT functions that were previously performed by people, such as coding. I think is certainly an area
yes,
that I think
yes,
is has seen some early adoption. Now,
right,
are we at
right,
scale? Or are we, at a place where everyone is going to just move totally away from people to, wholesale use of AI to code at the enterprise
yeah,
level for a large company? No, I don't. We're clearly not there. But
right, right,
you clearly can see
yes, we
that
can,
things are going to change, and
right,
in a dynamic economy, in a dynamic
right,
labor market, As
Right.
some skill sets go away, others rise. And so
Right.
that's
Right.
the unknown. So we're still early
Right.
days. I don't think
Right.
anyone who says with confidence they know what it's going to look like in 5, certainly
Right.
not 10 years, truly knows. But that's
Right.
my general sense of where we are.
Right. What I have heard through anecdotally is that it's not going to be the same need for developers that there was, say, even a couple of
That's
years
right.
ago.
Yeah,
Right?
and I think
That's
we
what
can
they,
see
you
that
know,
already because
already,
I mean
yes.
we all know you can go onto any of these publicly available
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
LLMs and
Yeah,
they can do basic coding for you
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
then have moved to more sophisticated coding. So there's no
yes.
question it is going to displace some of that work. An interesting overlay is how does this play with the leveraging of offshore and labor arbitrage offshore?
Right.
And so does it truly replace a lot of the domestic skill sets, or is it more of a replacement for many of the tasks being performed in lower cost areas of the world?
Right, right. So, given all of this, what would you say just are the top challenges that your firms, including your member firms, are facing? How would you characterize it? I think it's
Yeah.
good for people to know. Okay, we're dealing with this. Now the question is, how do we deal with it?
Yeah, no. Well, the top challenge, just make sure we don't lose sight of it. Is clearly client demand, and we can see it because we follow our own data, but then you can follow the public firm data, and it really tracks very very closely. If
Right,
you look at the public companies in our sector that report,
right.
so that's number one challenge. The
Okay,
other are a couple of other I think dynamics going on is our clients increasingly looking for companies to do more. And by more, that could mean provide greater coverage geographically, but it could also
okay.
mean more in terms of can you do more than just provide me with a person,
Right,
and that's getting into SOW, managed services, and ultimately
right,
full
right,
blown ownership of deliverable type solutions.
right,
And clients want more than someone certainly that understands their business and their business problems more than just filling a need for a skill set
right,
right off a
right.
job description.
Yeah,
And so I think that's one of the challenges. The other challenge that many of our firms face is it's a fairly crowded industry and a highly fragmented one is
right,
differentiation in the marketplace. And that goes back to what I mentioned just before, which is what's your special sauce? What do you bring to the table?
right,
What is the famous line, "We provide wonderful people and great service." That doesn't cut it. That could be the tagline for
right,
literally any firm out there. So,
right,
what do you bring to the table that is unique,
right,
or at least special,
right.
that can really differentiate you in a very crowded marketplace?
Right. I've been hearing from people that clients in the space want advisory also. But,
Yes,
they
that's
want to
right.
know, like, hey, so what else? What to do? How are we going to go? Like more strategic than just, like you said, placing someone to do a
Right,
job.
kind of what we would
Right.
call sort of more intensive consulting as
Right.
opposed
Right.
to
Right.
just providing staffing or staff augmentation.
Right. But I think earlier I would see that it was being asked of MSPs. Like, hey, if you're using an MSP and you have all these suppliers, the MSP's job was to keep them, keep the client on the cutting edge, bringing in innovation, bringing in
Right.
new tools. But now it looks from what I'm hearing that people are asking even, you know, depending on what the name is, master supplier, just a supplier, like, okay, what's more? Give me more. And not necessarily they're paying for it. They
That's
expect it
right.
along way. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Expect
right.
it.
Yeah, no, I think
Yeah.
that's right. So clients want more, and but they also want it at at a good price, and so that's the challenge. And
True.
and then
True. True.
obviously, we talked a little bit about offshore, but
Right.
The ability of companies offshore to deliver services keeps improving, and the sophistication of what they're able to deliver keeps improving.
Right.
So
Right.
again, what is your, what differentiates you, and why are you the go-to resource for your client or clients or prospects? Is a
Right. Right.
question that I think every business owner and executive needs to ponder.
And how are you? I mean, when I mean you, how is TechServe helping address this? Are you what is there anything that you are doing at your end with your team to say, hey, these are the challenges. This is what you should be looking for, and in what format are you giving this to them? How does this
Yeah,
work?
number, certainly at the core, and something that's been at the core of what we've done for a very long time, of course,
Yep.
is education. So educating people on the landscape, educating people on best practices across sales and recruiting. So that's one thing. The other
Right.
that we've really has grown very robust are are these virtual roundtables. So we've always had a culture of sharing, with the
Yep.
idea of sharing information, with the idea that there are very few secrets out there. There's no IP to speak of.
Right.
And so really it's if you give, you get. And that's been sort of a hallmark of our organization from the very beginning. And that's really taken a new, it's really been reflected in new form, which are these virtual roundtables, which started as executive roundtables. And we actually started them during COVID, because, of course, no one was getting together in person. And they were meeting quite frequently then. And now they've moved to monthly. And now we've added sales, recruiting, marketing, HR, just a whole variety of different ones. So there, it's really about tapping into the wisdom of crowds, and
Right.
the collective knowledge base of others, learning from the
Right.
mistakes of others, learning from the successes of others, along
Right.
these lines. And
Right.
so, and providing feedback. I mean, being a CEO or leader in an IT staffing firm or engineering staffing firm could be pretty lonely. I mean, you're supposed to have all
Yeah.
the answers, and you're not accountable to anyone, if you're
Right.
the owner of the firm. And so these
That's true.
forums really provide an opportunity to run things by others who are sitting in a similar position.
That's great. I've always been very interested in the work that you're doing, around policy. So,
Yes.
can you talk a little bit about the work you represent to policymakers, and also talk a little bit about H-1Bs? What
Yeah.
is the future?
Yeah. Good topic. Yeah. So we really were an organization that started over a policy challenge to our industry. Actually, it was an
Right.
existential challenge. Now, going on 35, almost 40 years ago.
Right.
And so one of the things we do is we monitor the legislative and regulatory landscape, particularly at the federal level. Uh,
Right.
and and our approach is not to tackle all labor and employment issues, or all issues that touch employers. There are organizations like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and other organizations that tackle the broad range of issues. We tend to focus really asking the question: if we did not weigh in on this issue, would anyone weigh in, representing the interests of IT and engineering staffing firms? And so that's a
Right.
great example. Going to the H-1B, is we
Right.
don't take on all aspects of the H-1B. There's many
Right.
advocacy groups that are working that issue in different
Right.
ways.
Right.
But really looking at it from the perspective of IT and engineering staffing firms,
Right.
and seeing, are in any new proposals, are they looking to potentially discriminate, or making it more difficult for our business model to tap into that resource? So
Got it.
that's really kind of how we approach it. And where H-1Bs are going, so we've really been stuck in terms of the count that is allowed into the country under the lottery for, I think it's now going on 20 years. So for a very, very long time.
And remind me, what is the count? I used
Uh,
to know
y-
this.
yeah, it's 65,000 plus
65,000.
20,000
Yeah.
for those that have graduated U.S. universities for advanced degrees. So it's a pretty modest it's a pretty modest number. And as a result, there's always an oversubscription during the lottery, for the available visas. They've changed the process,
Right.
somewhat.
Right.
Now, I think anyone who follows the news, even turns it on, twice a year, would know that
Right.
immigration has become a rather heated issue. And
Right.
even though not specifically focused on the high skilled or H-1Bs, it has made it very difficult to make any changes to immigration policy because typically
Right.
the way certainly congressional action works is if one issue moves in an area, there's the likelihood that others will attempt to make changes to other aspects. So, in other words, if you were to attempt to move a bill dealing with low skilled or undocumented workers, it is likely someone will try to change things around H1s and vice versa. So for that
Right.
reason, it's been virtually impossible. There's been no meaningful immigration legislation in now really decades as a result. And obviously, we have a broken system, but
Right.
we're so divided in terms of how to address it that I don't see any resolution. So that basically all leaves us to then the administration of H-1Bs. And I think we can fully expect, even though there's an internal debate within the Trump administration between those that are sort of pro technology and pro H-1B, sort of the Elon Musk side of things,
Right.
versus the Stephen Miller more restrictionist view. I
Right.
think we can expect it's going to be more difficult in terms
Oh,
of
really?
approvals, RFEs under a Trump administration than it had been under the Biden administration. That was certainly our experience in the first Trump administration.
Interesting. Thanks. So let's talk a little bit about the growing need for reskilling and upskilling, especially for IT and engineering. What do you see happening?
Well, that's unfortunately that's not typically a focus of most IT and engineering staffing firms because of the
Right.
model.
Right.
We know from our benchmarking, and this has been true, even though it may vary a month or two. We know the typical engagement for let's say on the IT staffing side is a median of 8 months. And maybe
Right.
other years it could be 9 months, but it is almost never less than 3 months. And so,
Right.
but can sometimes extend, past a year or more. But by
Right.
and large, it's very difficult, given that model, given that a
Right.
consultant will work for one staffing firm and then move to another, to really invest in reskilling and upskilling
Yeah, there's not
consultants.
much of that.
Yeah, so we
Yeah.
really don't see much of it. It's very, very hard. I think some folks have tried to figure it out and see what makes
Right.
sense. And that's not to
Right.
say that maybe they provide people with access to some online courses to upgrade their
Courses. Yeah. Yeah.
skills. But
Yeah.
we don't see a big investment on that front at all.
Yeah.
It's just the model just does not really
Lend
allow for
itself
it.
to that.
Yeah, it doesn't
No,
lend it.
I have heard noises about how people are saying, but I think boot camps don't necessarily constitute. I have heard stories about staffing firms paying for people to go to boot camps, coding boot camps, and get skilled. But I think that might have been a thing of the past,
I think it's a
given
thing of the past. From what I've
yeah,
heard, and it is anecdotal, I'm not sure those were all that successful, and really almost always required a client sponsor alongside it, someone who is
got it.
willing to, because typically those boot camps, you're talking about, junior level individuals, and
Right,
so I think when we were in the extraordinarily tight labor situation, people were looking for
right,
any potential
right,
resource. But
right.
I don't know if those work, certainly
You're
with
right.
IT staffing firms at the center. I think it's
You're
more,
right.
it really, maybe some end clients do it. And I think maybe some IT staffing firms have been partners in that. But by and large, I don't really see that as a trend.
So let's talk about what's next for TechServe Alliance. And I'm just curious, what do you see? How do you define success for the organization and for your members?
Yeah. Well, really, you have the answer of that almost in the question, which is we define our success as the success of our members and stakeholders. So if they are better at what they're doing, able to grow more, able to become more profitable, able to serve their clients and serve their clients and consultants better, that for
Right,
us is success. And so
right,
obviously, we want to be sort of the indispensable resource for IT and engineering staffing firms. And
right,
so along those lines, we've really moved beyond our founding, sort of approach, which had really been education, advocacy, a conference, to providing a number of other service offerings.
right,
And part of that is, we are thankful that we enjoy the trust of our members, so they know that we're going to deliver, a high quality product at a cost effective price,
right,
in a real understanding of their business and what they do.
right,
Um,
right, right,
so that's sort of a unique approach, and because we focus on IT and engineering staffing, we can deliver services that are highly relevant. So we have over 500 clients in terms of our business insurance program. We have a health insurance program. We recently, a few years ago, started facilitating M&A transactions among our members because we have this
right,
vast network.
right,
And then most recently, and this gets really more to the answer to your question, we launched TechServe 360, which is our ASO, with the idea being that what our folks do best is selling and recruiting and really taking on the back office functions for our members.
right,
And because
right,
one of the things we know from our benchmarking is that scale matters in this industry. And you can
right.
see it among the larger firms that can be so much more efficient from a cost standpoint because of the nature of scale and efficiencies. And so we're trying to bring that scale to smaller companies through,
Right.
basically the collective buying power and of a resource. And so that's been our approach.
Well, that's great. So, where do you see this industry heading? 1 year
Uh,
from now, 2 years from now, some of the
uh,
predictions.
so I know with 100% certainty it's going to be different.
Okay.
But I, you know, I've never been one to adopt, unrealistically optimistic or pessimistic views. It always winds up being somewhat in the middle. Now, with that said, this has always been an industry with folks who do okay and folks who do extraordinarily well.
Yeah.
And one of the other things that I think is absolutely critical is operating with knowledge, data driven management, and that's obviously part of what we do. But where we go as an industry, I mean, clearly AI is going to play an increasing role. Automation, AI, other technologies are going to play an increasing role in our
Right.
industry.
Right.
And demands for different kinds of skill sets will shift.
Right.
And so I do think we're going to continue along the path where customers demand greater value, and basically having our folks move up the value chain to
Right.
grow.
Right.
I think the days of being a generalist, willing to serve anyone in any industry, in any skill set, while there's always a place for it, that becomes more challenging. Ultimately, if you can solve your client's problems, I mean, that's always the recipe for success and the ability to thrive in the future.
Oh, thank you. What advice do you have, if any, for your members and other staffing firms in the space?
Yeah, you really to think strategically. I mean, this is so hard for our people who work so hard in terms of their day to day. But I think first, and we do this, come to a conference, like our executive summit, where you can really pull yourself out of the day to day and be exposed to other leaders and a lot of content on new ways of looking at things. Obviously, new
Oh,
products, new
sorry,
services.
Mark. When is that? When is your?
So it's November 4th through 6th. We're in
Okay.
Marco Island, Florida.
Okay.
We'll usually have about 400 to 500 people there, and then
Okay.
we also have partnered with SIM, the Society for Information Management. So we have CIOs, CTOs there as well,
Oh.
and that's the opportunity for our folks to build some relationships.
Oh yeah.
Um,
The audience. So your suppliers have the opportunity to talk to people they're selling into.
Yes, yes,
Oh,
yeah,
that's
and
really
and
cool.
and we
Yeah.
do encourage folks not to use it as not to go to the cocktail hour and pull out their brochure or
Right.
the the electronic equivalent of it, but we do see it as an opportunity to build relationships.
Right.
And so we do joint keynotes, joint networking events, joint
Right.
social events.
Right.
And so we've been doing it 4 years now, so it's been quite successful. So we're excited about that. But going back to the advice is pull yourself out of the day to day and take an opportunity to be exposed to the thoughts of others, because no one does everything at the absolute best. There's always something to
Right.
be learned from being exposed to others. Also,
Right.
pull yourself out if you have an executive leadership team, and pull yourself away and do strategic planning and thinking away from the day to day. And then
Right.
just continue to be informed, leverage data. I can't emphasize that enough. We do annual benchmarking report, and we also capture KPIs on the dashboard on a monthly basis, and we're looking to do other things from a data perspective. But you can't make informed decisions without having the data on which to do it. It's like you go to a doctor. The first thing you want to do is do a diagnosis. If you're not growing at the same level as the rest of the industry, the question is why. Well, how are you going to figure that out? And you can only lean on data, comparing your data against benchmarking data. You could say I grew 5% in 2021 and 2022. Well,
Right.
maybe that's better than you did the prior year, but that's way below the industry. Now, if you
Industry.
told me you
Okay.
grew 5% or 10% in 2024, I'd say you're performing way above the industry. And then,
Right.
of course, then you can look at other elements. What are your gross margins?
Yeah.
Client diversification. There's all these questions. Your comp plan for your recruiters and your sales teams. These are all things you should be benchmarking against industry metrics. Not to follow the crowd always, but to at least have an idea is where is the benchmark? What does a top performing firm look like? And we actually
Right.
break that out. And where do you fit in terms of your performance against the industry?
No, that was great. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. I
Sure.
really, as always, enjoyed chatting with you.
Yeah, it was my pleasure, Subhadra. Really enjoyed it as well.